What was the life of a widow actually like in the time of Jesus? What happened to someone who was left alone in a world without retirement, without public assistance, and without any guarantee of social protection? For centuries, we have read biblical passages about widows as simple spiritual examples or secondary characters in the stories of the Gospels. But in the Jewish world of the first century, losing a husband could mean something far more immediate and profound. And this situation was common. Low life expectancy, frequent diseases, heavy physical labor, and constant conflicts caused many women to spend years, sometimes decades, living without a husband. Stay until the end, because understanding the reality of these women reveals why they appear so often in the words of Jesus and sheds new light on the world in which he lived. In the ancient world, the presence of widows was not rare or exceptional. In many villages and cities of the Mediterranean, they were a visible part of the human landscape. This did not happen by accident. Several aspects of daily life made male death relatively common, creating a significant number of women who had to continue life without a husband. Life expectancy was considerably lower than what we know today. Infectious diseases circulated easily and could spread rapidly through entire communities. Fevers, infections, and illnesses that today we treat with relative ease were, at that time, constant threats. A single difficult season or a local epidemic could deeply alter the composition of a family. In addition, daily work required intense physical effort. Most men worked in agriculture, shepherding, fishing, or construction activities. These occupations demanded constant strength, prolonged exposure to the sun, and frequent travel across difficult terrain. Accidents happened. Injuries could become fatal in the absence of proper treatment. The gradual wear of the body over the years also took its toll. Local conflicts added another layer of risk. Roman presence, regional tensions, and episodes of violence were not uncommon. Even when there was no open war, disputes and repression could result in unexpected deaths. Another detail also contributed to this reality. It was common for men to marry at an older age than their wives. This age difference increased the probability that the woman would outlive her husband by many years. In some cases, a woman still relatively young could suddenly find herself alone, responsible for continuing life without the structure that once supported her family. This reality was not exclusive to Judea. Similar situations existed in Rome, Greece, Egypt, and throughout the ancient Mediterranean. But the real problem was not only the death of the husband. The real challenge began after that. In the time of Jesus, a woman rarely existed socially in isolation. Her position within the community was almost always connected to the family structure of the household in which she lived. The family was organized in a patriarchal way, and male authority occupied the center of that organization. First the father, then the husband, and later the sons assumed this role. A woman's public identity was closely tied to these relationships. While she remained in her father's house, the young woman lived under his protection and responsibility. When she married, that structure was transferred to her husband. He represented the family before the community, managed resources, and assumed legal obligations. The woman participated intensely in domestic and economic life, but her social security depended on the stability of that family structure. When the husband died, that foundation could weaken quickly. The absence of a male figure in the house did not mean only emotional loss. It often represented the loss of income, legal protection, and even position within the local community. The continuation of security then depended on other family members. Adult sons could assume responsibility for their mother. Brothers of the husband or other close relatives could also offer shelter and support. When this family network functioned well, the widow remained integrated into the life of the household and the community. But that protection was not guaranteed. Some women had no children. Others were distant from relatives or belonged to small families. In such cases, the death of a husband could open the door to immediate hardship. It is important to remember that not all widows lived in poverty. Women from families with resources could manage property, maintain possessions, and preserve a certain stability. Even so, these situations were less common. For many widows, the reality was one of growing vulnerability. For many of them, the most urgent question was not theoretical. It was intensely practical: how to survive the next day. After the death of a husband, survival became a daily concern. Without a guaranteed income, and without any form of public assistance, many widows had to find immediate ways to support themselves. Life offered no pause for reorganization. The food of the following day depended on the work done that very day. Many of these activities took place within the traditionally female sphere of work. Spinning wool was one of the most common tasks. The fiber was prepared, twisted, and transformed into thread that could later be used to weave fabrics. Weaving, sewing, and small repairs to clothing were also part of this constant labor. These tasks required patience, skill, and many hours repeating the same movements. Other women devoted themselves to grinding grain. Using manual stone mills, they crushed wheat or barley until it became flour. It was heavy and time-consuming work, often performed every single day because flour could not be stored for long. Food preparation and domestic services could also generate some kind of payment or assistance. Some widows worked in the homes of larger families, helping with daily tasks such as cooking, cleaning, or caring for children. Others found small jobs in local markets, selling simple goods or offering basic services. These were activities considered typical for women within that social context. Even at an advanced age, many continued working. There was no retirement. There was no pension. Survival depended on one's physical ability to remain active. Besides work, another important form of survival came through charity. Alms, community help, and occasional distribution of food could complement what was lacking. At times, neighbors or relatives offered temporary support. But beyond working to survive, there was another decisive question. Where did these women actually live after they became widows? After the death of a husband, the place where a widow would live could change quickly. In many cases, the most common solution was to remain within the existing family structure. If she had adult sons, she could continue living in the same house, now under their responsibility. In other situations, the widow might move in with her husband's brothers or other close relatives. Survival often depended on this family network. When such a structure did not exist or was not sufficient, other solutions appeared. Some women shared houses with other widows or distant relatives, dividing limited space and resources. Others lived in small, simple rooms within villages, often attached to larger houses or improvised constructions. In ancient cities, the environment also reflected this reality. Urban areas were dense, with narrow streets, compact houses, and little separation between public and private spaces. Life happened very close to the street. Because of this, people's social conditions were easily visible. Some elderly widows could be seen sitting in public areas, especially near markets, city gates, or busy roads. Imagine an already aged woman sitting on the warm stone ground, her bare feet covered in dust, her simple tunic marked with patches sewn many times over the years. Beside her rests a small empty container. People pass in a hurry. Some stop for a moment and leave a piece of bread or a few coins. For many of these women, that help was what allowed them to make it through another day. clothing also revealed much about their situation. Simple garments, worn by time and frequently patched, showed years of continuous use. New fabrics were rare. Each piece had to last as long as possible. In the ancient world, poverty rarely remained hidden. It could be seen in the house, in the clothes, and even in the way someone occupied the spaces of the city. Even so, Jewish tradition did not completely ignore these women. The law of Israel itself attempted to offer some kind of protection. Even in a harsh and often unequal world, the religious tradition of Israel recognized the vulnerability of widows. In Hebrew law, three groups repeatedly appear side by side when social protection is discussed: the foreigner, the orphan, and the widow. These three represented people who, for different reasons, could find themselves without defense within the normal structure of society. For this reason, several laws sought to reduce the risk of complete abandonment. One of these measures appeared in the fields. During harvest, landowners were not supposed to collect everything that grew on their land. Sheaves that fell to the ground, or portions forgotten during the work, were meant to remain there. The intention was simple: to allow poor people to gather what remained and secure food for themselves. This practice appears clearly in one of the best-known stories of the Old Testament. After the death of her husband, Ruth returns to Bethlehem, accompanied by her mother-in-law Naomi, who is also a widow. Without land and without their own resources, Ruth begins to follow the workers during the harvest. As the reapers cut the wheat, she gathers the ears left behind. This action was neither intrusion nor theft. It was exactly what the law permitted vulnerable people to do in order to survive. Other forms of care also existed. During certain religious festivals, widows were meant to be included in the collective meals of the community. Eating together was not only a sharing of food, but also a public recognition of belonging within the people of Israel. Even so, these laws depended on something essential in order to function: the faithfulness of the people who applied them. This did not always happen. Centuries later, Jesus would strongly denounce religious leaders who exploited precisely those they were supposed to protect. In Mark 12:40, he states that some scribes devour widows' houses. The expression likely describes abusive practices in which experts in the law administered property, gave legal advice, or controlled the assets of vulnerable women, often taking advantage of their position of authority. Instead of protecting them, they turned faith into an instrument of exploitation. These words show that the problem was known and serious. Even with protective laws, reality could be very different. Yet beyond these community practices, there was still a specific family solution that could completely change the destiny of a widow. Within the family structure of the ancient world, there was another practice that could completely change the destiny of a widow. It was known as Levirate marriage. The rule was relatively simple. If a man died without leaving children, his brother or a close male relative could marry the widow. This new marriage was not seen merely as a common union, but as a way of preserving the continuity of the family. The purpose of this practice was twofold. On one hand, it offered protection to the woman who had lost her husband. By remaining within the same family, she continued integrated into the household, with access to sustenance and social protection. On the other hand, the Levirate also preserved the inheritance and the name of the deceased. The first son born from this new union was legally considered a descendant of the man who had died, keeping his lineage alive within the community. This practice appears dramatically in an ancient episode of Scripture. In the book of Genesis, Tamar marries Er, the son of Judah. When Er dies without leaving children, the responsibility of producing offspring for the brother falls upon Onan. However, Onan refuses to fully carry out this duty. He accepts the union, but avoids allowing Tamar to have a child who would perpetuate the name of his deceased brother. Later, Tamar ends up once again without protection within the family. The story reveals something important. Although the Levirate existed as a social and family practice, it depended on the real willingness of the relatives involved. Not every brother or relative was willing to assume that responsibility. When that happened, the widow's situation could become even more fragile. Without a husband, without children, and without family support, her security could quickly disappear. Yet even in the midst of such fragility, the story of these women does not end only in abandonment. Some of them found a surprising path of strength and hope. Despite the material difficulties many faced, some widows found in religious life a new path of meaning. Without a husband, without small children to care for, and in some cases already advanced in age, some devoted their days to prayer, fasting, and service within the religious community. What had once been occupied by family responsibilities was now filled by a routine marked by devotion. This reality appears clearly in an episode preserved in the Gospel of Luke. There we find the figure of Anna, described as a prophetess and an elderly widow. The text states that after losing her husband while still relatively young, she lived many years dedicated to service in the Temple of Jerusalem. Luke describes her routine in direct terms. She did not depart from the temple, worshiping with fasting and prayers night and day. Anna's presence in that environment reveals something important about the role some widows could occupy. Even without elevated social position or wealth, they could become spiritually respected figures within the community. Their constant dedication to prayer and religious life gave them a new form of belonging. In the biblical account itself, Anna appears when Mary and Joseph bring the child Jesus to the temple. Upon seeing him, she recognizes something extraordinary and begins speaking about the child to all who were waiting for the redemption of Israel. In that moment, the widow does not appear as someone forgotten by society, but as a witness to one of the earliest moments in the story of Christ. And perhaps for this reason, widows appear so often in the narratives of the Gospels and in the words of Jesus. In the world in which Jesus lived, widows represented a reality that everyone recognized. They were among the most vulnerable people in society. Without a husband, often without adult sons, and with limited resources, they depended on the justice of the community and, in many cases, on the mercy of God Himself. For this reason, when Jesus spoke about widows, His listeners did not imagine distant characters. They thought of real people they saw every day. One of the clearest examples appears in a parable recorded in the Gospel of Luke. Jesus tells the story of a widow who repeatedly seeks out a judge to ask for justice against someone who had wronged her. The text says that the judge neither feared God nor respected anyone. Even so, the widow keeps returning, insisting, refusing to give up. Finally, the judge decides to grant her request, not because of true justice, but simply to free himself from her persistence. With this story, Jesus teaches about perseverance in prayer. If even an unjust judge eventually responds to the insistence of a defenseless widow, how much more will God hear those who cry out to Him? Another episode takes place in the Temple of Jerusalem. The Gospel of Mark describes Jesus observing the people who were placing offerings into the temple treasury. Many wealthy individuals contributed large amounts. Then a poor widow approaches and deposits 2 small coins, almost without value. Jesus calls His disciples and explains that this woman gave more than all the others because she offered everything she had to live on. These stories reveal something profound. By speaking about widows, Jesus exposes both social injustice and the value of genuine faith. And understanding this reveals something essential about the world in which Jesus lived, and about the heart of the message He proclaimed. And if this documentary deepened your historical understanding of the Bible and strengthened your faith, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with others. Also, write in the comments which part caught your attention the most. Your support helps this content reach more people and continue bringing history, faith, and knowledge to an ever-growing audience. Until the next video, and may God bless you.